The Dead Man's Briefcase. The sea is calm that morning. Waves roll against the Spanish coast, carrying with them an unexpected passenger, a body, drifting, turning slowly in the tide. He wears a British officer's uniform. His boots are caked in sand, his pockets heavy with seawater, and chained to his chest is a black attaché case, clasped shut against the surf. To the fishermen who discover him, he is just another casualty of war, a pilot lost at sea, a soldier washed ashore. But inside that briefcase is something far more dangerous than a weapon. Inside are secrets, maps, orders, letters, clues to where the Allies will strike next. The kind of secrets that, if believed, could send German armies racing in the wrong direction. But here's the truth. The man lying on that beach is no soldier. He is already dead, and his mission has only just begun. Europe, 1943. The Allies are preparing for the great invasion of Nazi-held Europe, an assault meant to crack open Hitler's fortress and begin the long march to victory. But there's a problem. The coast of France is fortified with steel and fire. Every beach, every harbor, every stretch of sand is lined with barbed wire, bunkers, and machine guns. A frontal assault would be suicide. The Allies need another way in. They set their eyes on Sicily, the gateway to the Mediterranean, a stepping stone into Europe. But the Germans suspect it. They are watching, waiting, building their defenses. And so, in the shadows of Whitehall, a plan is born, not of bombs or bullets, but of whispers, forged letters, and a single, lifeless body. A deception so bold, so unlikely, that it might just change the course of the war. It is called Operation Mincemeat. By the spring of 1943, the war in Europe stood at a knife's edge. The Axis still held vast territory. German divisions dug into France. Italy, though crumbling, remained loyal to Hitler. And across the Mediterranean, the Allies had clawed their way through North Africa at a terrible cost. Now came the question, where to strike next? The choice was clear to generals on both sides. Sicily, the rocky island at the toe of Italy's boot. Take Sicily, and the Allies could march north into the heart of Europe. Take Sicily, and the Mediterranean would belong to them. But the Germans saw it too. Their intelligence officers warned of an Allied landing. Their troops began to fortify the island's beaches, the cliffs, the harbors. Every day their defenses grew stronger. For the Allies, a frontal assault would mean catastrophe, tens of thousands of lives lost. Perhaps the invasion shattered before it even began. So the Allies needed something more, not just strength of arms, but cunning. They had to make the Germans believe that Sicily was safe, that the real invasion would strike somewhere else. Perhaps Greece, perhaps Sardinia, anywhere but the island that mattered most. The task of creating this illusion fell to British intelligence, a handful of officers working in the shadows, searching for a way to trick Hitler's war machine. And it was here, in the smoke-filled rooms of London, that two unlikely minds began to weave a plan of deception so audacious, so bizarre, that even their fellow spies doubted it could work. A plan that began with the question, where do you find the perfect corpse? In the corridors of British intelligence, two officers carried the weight of an impossible task. Ewan Montague, a naval lawyer turned spy master, calm, methodical, with a talent for bending rules until they nearly broke. And Charles Chumley, a lanky, eccentric airman with a wild imagination, the sort of man whose ideas teetered between brilliance and madness. Together, they were tasked with fooling the German high command. Not a battalion of soldiers, not a single spy in the field, but Hitler himself. The idea they settled on was as daring as it was grotesque. They would plant a body, a corpse dressed as a British officer, equipped with documents hinting at an Allied invasion of Greece and Sardinia. The body would wash ashore in neutral Spain, a country riddled with German agents eager to steal secrets from the British. If the ruse worked, German divisions would be pulled away from Sicily. If it failed, the enemy would know exactly where the Allies were coming, and tens of thousands would die in the trap. The plan sounded like fiction, something out of a spy novel, but war often blurs the line between the real and the absurd, and so Montague and Cholmondeley pressed forward, convinced that one dead man, armed with the right lies, could mislead an empire. Now they faced the next grim question. Who would that man be? What corpse could they turn into a soldier and a savior? The plan demanded a corpse, but not just any corpse. It had to be convincing. A man who could pass as a British officer, one who appeared to have died in the sea, carrying secrets too important to lose. Finding such a man was no simple matter. The British intelligence files were combed. Hospitals, morgues, asylums, each possibility raised questions. Would the body appear authentic? Would the cause of death match the story they needed to tell? At last, in a London hospital, they found him. Glyndwr Michael, a Welsh drifter, 34 years old, alone, penniless, without family to claim him. He had died after swallowing rat poison, a tragic, quiet end that might have gone unnoticed. But in death, his anonymity became his greatest asset. For the officers of Operation Mincemeat, Michael was perfect. He was young enough to be a soldier, healthy enough to look the part, and with no family to ask questions, he could vanish into a new identity. He would no longer be Glyndwr Michael. The world would know him instead as Major William Martin of the Royal Marines, a man who had never lived, yet was about to play one of the most important roles in the Second World War. If the Germans were to believe in Major William Martin, he couldn't just exist on paper. He had to feel real, human, messy. So British intelligence set about building a man from scraps of imagination. A photograph of a smiling young woman was slipped into his wallet, his fiancée, a woman he would never meet. Love letters, ink still fresh, told of stolen moments and longing. They gave him a set of keys, a receipt for a new shirt, a stern letter from his bank scolding him for being overdrawn. Every detail mattered, because German intelligence would look for flaws, an officer too clean, a life too tidy, and the illusion would crumble. The most important piece was a letter, a personal note between two British generals, hinting that the Allies were preparing to strike Greece and Sardinia, not Sicily. This was the hook, the lie carefully wrapped in truth. All of it was packed into a briefcase, strapped to his lifeless wrist with a chain. And so, William Martin, a man who had never breathed, who had never laughed, who had never truly loved, now carried the burden of an empire's deception. All that remained was to deliver him to the enemy. They took the body at night, a cold van moving through the sleeping streets of London, carrying something the war could not afford to lose, a life, repurposed. Wrapped, dressed, packed into a steel canister with a lock and a lie. Inside, the officers placed 21 pounds of dry ice, a white, biting chill that would slow time for the corpse and hide the smell of decay. They closed the lid, sealed the secret, and began the long, quiet drive to the Scottish coast. At Greenock, the canister was handed to a submarine crew who had been told they carried top-secret meteorological gear. The boat was HMS Seraph, and her captain, Norman Bill Jewell, accepted the odd cargo without fanfare. They sailed into the Atlantic on the 19th of April, 1943, a small, dark ship threading its way toward a neutral shore where German eyes and ears were known to watch. For 10 long days, the crew kept the secret, the briefcase strapped to the wrist of a dead man, the letters folded in iron to look authentic, the photograph of an imagined fiancé tucked into an inner pocket. As they neared the Spanish coast, the tension grew. Seraph reconnoitered the shoreline off Huelva, a place chosen because it was neutral, because Spanish officials might pass what they found on to Berlin. The plan depended on chance, and on other people doing what the British expected. Fishermen finding the body, a naval judge taking the paper seriously, German agents intercepting the news. In the early hours of 30 April, Seraph surfaced. Jewel ordered the canister hauled up, and the officers stood by as if witnessing a small, solemn burial. He read Psalm 39 over the makeshift grave. I am but a sojourner here. Then, with the submarine's wash behind it, the body was eased into the water, nudged, not flung, and allowed to drift toward shore. The empty canister was destroyed at sea so no curious hands could study its construction. The crew steamed away, leaving behind a corpse, a briefcase, and a story that would soon begin its own life on the shore. At dawn on April 30th, 1943, the tide carried a man to the shores of Huelva, Spain. A fisherman spotted him first, a body in a British uniform, face pale, uniform soaked, a briefcase chained to his wrist. The Spanish authorities were summoned. Neutral in name, but riddled with German agents, Huelva was exactly the stage the British had chosen, and the play was already in motion. The local naval judge inspected the body. Major William Martin of the Royal Marines, dead, drowned at sea. In his pockets they found theater stubs, a photograph of a young woman, receipts, letters, a life that seemed too ordinary to question. But it was the briefcase that mattered. Inside, sealed in official envelopes, were the personal letters between generals, the ones hinting at Allied plans for Greece and Sardinia. By May 1st, word of the discovery had already reached German agents. They pressured Spanish officials to open the papers. Spain hesitated, pretended to cooperate slowly, but the Germans were skilled at persuasion. Soon, the documents were in their hands. In Berlin, the deception was working. The Germans believed they had stumbled onto gold, a secret so valuable it seemed impossible to be false. Major William Martin had begun his final mission, and the future of the Allied invasion was slipping quietly into enemy hands. By the time the documents reached Berlin, they had passed through many hands: Spanish officials, German agents, analysts who studied every crease, every watermark, every ink stain. The verdict was unanimous. The papers were genuine. No forgery, no trick. This was gold. Admiral Karl Donitz, head of the German Navy, reported to Hitler himself that the Allies were preparing to strike in Greece and Sardinia, not Sicily. Sicily, he argued, was only a feint, too obvious, too expected. Hitler listened. He was already suspicious of Sicily, convinced the Allies would try to outsmart him. Now here, in his hands, was proof. Orders spread quickly through the Wehrmacht. Panzer divisions were pulled from Sicily and sent toward Greece. Defenses shifted, resources scattered. German eyes turned to the wrong horizon. And all the while, Major William Martin, a man who had never lived, was tightening his grip on the outcome of the war. The deception was working, but for Montague and Chumbley, far away in London, there was no celebration yet. They had lit the fuse, but would it burn long enough to change history? On the night of July 9th, 1943, the Mediterranean roared with engines. More than 160,000 Allied troops surged towards Sicily, carried by thousands of ships and aircraft. It was the greatest seaborne invasion in history up to that point. The Germans had expected a trap. They had shifted tanks and troops to Greece and Sardinia. Sicily, though still defended, was left vulnerable, its garrisons thinner than they should have been. When the first waves of Allied soldiers stormed the beaches, resistance was fierce but scattered. German commanders scrambled, calling for reinforcements that were hundreds of miles away. By the time they realized the truth, it was too late. Within weeks, the island was in Allied hands. The gateway to Italy had been pried open. Mussolini's regime, already teetering, began to collapse, and Hitler's southern flank, once secure, was now unraveling. All because of one corpse, one briefcase, and one great deception. Operation Mincemeat had done more than mislead the enemy. It had saved thousands of Allied lives, shortened the road into Europe, and proven that in war, the sharpest weapon is sometimes not the sword, but the story. For months after Sicily, Major William Martin was remembered as a fallen hero. The British press printed his obituary. The Navy listed his name among the honored dead. Flowers were laid upon his grave in Huelva, Spain. But Major Martin had never lived. His name, his fiancée, his life, all were inventions. The truth of his story was locked away, hidden behind official secrets. Only decades later, when the files were finally declassified, did the world learn of Glyndwr Michael, a Welsh drifter who died alone in London, his body claimed not by family, but by history. In death, he had accomplished what no soldier could. He had deceived Hitler himself. Operation Mincemeat became a legend in intelligence circles, a reminder that wars are not won by might alone. They are won by wit, by imagination, by the strange, uncomfortable truth that even a corpse can change the course of nations. Today, Major William Martin still rests in Huelva. His gravestone bears the rank and branch of service he never held. But beneath, a later inscription was added. Glyndwr Michael served as Major William Martin. One man, two names, and a story that blurred the line between the real and the unreal. And that, like so many stories we uncover here on the Dusty Ledger, is history's reminder that power often hides in the smallest of places, that lies, if crafted carefully enough, can weigh as much as armies, and that the past is never truly past. It lingers, written in shadows.